Hitchhiking, especially alone, is always risky. But when a young couple with a small child stops to give a ride, it's hard to imagine that this trip will lead not to the intended destination but to an unimaginable hell. At 20 years old, Colin Stan considered herself an experienced hitchhiker. In the 1970s, hitchhiking was a common practice. Sometimes it was even someone's only way of getting around. Of course, she had heard about various cases. Sometimes the stories were so frightening that Colin would say it would be the last time for him. If she had known that her story would become, without exaggeration, one of the most shocking. Before this, the girl always had good luck. Her main rule: do not in the car with the first driver you come across. Colin mainly rode with elderly couples and women. On May 19, 1977, Colin Stan hitchhiked on the road. She wanted to surprise her friend and come to her neighboring state for her birthday. Thus, she needed to travel from her hometown of Eugene, Oregon, to Red Bluff in Northern California, over 550 kilometers away. She had already turned down 2 drivers, carefully choosing whose co-passenger to be. In the third car that stopped, there was a young couple with a small child. They seemed very friendly and said they would gladly give the girl a ride to Red Bluff. When Colin got into the car, her fellow passengers introduced themselves. The driver turned out to be 23-year-old Cameron Hooker. Next to him sat his 19-year-old wife, Janice, with their little daughter. On the way, they stopped at a gas station to refuel and use the restroom. Cameron Hooker was born in Alturas, California, in 1953. Former classmates and teachers remembered him as a happy child, cheerful, sociable, and a lover of teasing other students. Sometimes his jokes were quite cruel, but children often do not have a high level of empathy. The Hooker family settled in Reed Bluff in 1969. During this time, Cameron's personality underwent noticeable changes. He became withdrawn and avoided social activities. There was nothing surprising about this either. Cameron was far from the first teenager to go through such a phase, closing himself off. No incidents, traumatizing events were found in his life. When Cameron met his future wife, Janice, his inclination towards sadism began to show. Janice was only 15 years old. When she met 19-year-old Cameron, the guy seemed so mature to her. By that time he was already working at the sawmill. The teenage girl felt insecure and admitted that she was fascinated by the fact that a guy who was older than her was showing interest in her. Janice fell in love, as she put it, with the tall, slim, and handsome Cameron of that time. She herself admitted that in order to keep him, she was ready for anything. One day Cameron asked if he could suspend her from a tree using leather handcuffs. He said he had done this with his other girlfriends before and they all enjoyed it. Young Janice agreed. This experience scared the girl a lot. But Cameron was so tender and attentive afterwards that he was able to smooth over the fear and dispel any concerns. Cameron Hooker and Janice were married in 1975. Sadomasochistic acts expanded to include beatings, choking, and underwater submersion. Once, Cameron nearly killed his young wife. Janice gave birth to a daughter in 1976. And unbelievably, she was truly happy in this marriage. The first girl to fall victim to this awful compromise was Maria Elizabeth Spanhike, nicknamed Marlies. Marlies moved to California from Cleveland, Ohio, at the end of 1975. She lived with her fiancé and worked part-time as a model at a camera store. She was only 19 years old when she was noticed by Cameron and Dennis, walking along Mangrove Avenue. The girl was clearly in a hurry, and the couple offered her a ride. Marlies agreed. They drove to Rio Linda Boulevard. When the girl started to get out of the car, Cameron grabbed her wrist and pulled her back in. Pulling out a knife, he ordered her to go with them. They brought the captive to their home and dragged her into the basement. Cameron tortured Marlies and then strangled her. They buried her body near Lassen Park in their hometown. Despite what happened, Janice stayed with her husband. Moreover, she agreed to a new maid. The road was long and monotonous. The conversations gradually died down. The car suddenly turned into a secluded forest. Before Colin could understand anything, Cameron sat next to her in the back seat, holding a knife to her throat. He placed a wooden special box on her head, weighing 9 kilograms, which he made himself. The head box he designed blocked sound and light. They arrived at their home at night. Over the next few hours, Colin was subjected to severe torture. Cameron, obsessed with his disgusting desires, constructed a real torture chamber in the basement of his house. By agreement with his wife, he could not rape his victim. Over time, the agreement changed, and Cameron started to include rape in his methods of torture. The next day, after all the abuses, Cameron put the girl in a wooden box resembling a coffin. Sometimes she was in this box for up to 23 hours a day. She only got out when Cameron wanted to continue his torment. Every time the box lid opened, Colin experienced a very strange mix of emotions. It was hard for her to breathe inside. She was given almost no water despite the high temperature inside this coffin. She was not given food. She was afraid that her captors would wall her up in this box forever. Therefore, when she heard the sounds of the lock opening, she first felt relief, which quickly turned into horror. Her knees were shaking, blood pounding in her temples. She didn't know what to expect today. The search for Colin began only after 4 days thanks to friends in Eugene. The parents were convinced that their daughter was in California, and the girlfriend didn't even know that Colin was coming to her, as it was a surprise for her. The search was complicated by the large distance at which the girl disappeared. Furthermore, there are several routes from Eugene to Red Bluff. Nothing could be established then. In the Hooker family's house, everything seemed to be going as usual for a young family. Janice was sitting with their little daughter, while Cameron was going to work. But only after work he regularly took Colin to the basement. So the months passed. Unbearable existence. Torture, alternating with being buried almost for a whole day. Hunger, constant humiliation, lack of clothing. In early 1978, Cameron told Colin, "What is a member of a satanic organization called the Company, an influential and ruthless gang that has been monitoring her and her family's house till now." Of course, it was all made up just to intimidate and further subjugate the victim. Cameron forced Colin to sign a document stating that she would become his slave forever. According to the contract, she must provide all her being for any desires of her slave owner. If she violates the slavery contract and escapes, the company will find her. The name Colin was changed to the letter K, and she was forced to call Cameron the Master. She was not allowed to drink, eat, or speak without permission. Cameron fantasized that Colin is a female heroine of a French erotic novel published in 1954 story of O, one of his favorite books. In May 1978, the Hooker family moved to a large house on wheels with an annex and a courtyard, along with their captive. Cameron built a new wooden crate for Colin. He was ventilated and built into the lower part of the marital bed. This was not done accidentally. Cameron wanted Colin to be involved in all aspects of the couple's personal life. In 1978, Janice gave birth to their second daughter on this bed while Colin was underneath her. After a year of living in a wooden coffin, after daily torment and intimidation from the company and her masters, the girl had become so docile that Cameron felt he could trust his slave. Now she could freely roam around the house, finally allowed to wear clothes and eat properly. Colin took care of household chores, helped Janice take care of the children. Hooker's daughters saw her as a nanny. Colin never denied it. In the evenings, she climbed into her drawer. The children, naturally, did not know about this. They did not know where the nanny slept and what happened to her at night. Later, Colin even allowed her to go outside. The neighbors were also convinced that Colin's nanny was in a house of hookers. Colin never asked them or anyone else for help. Standing in front of the open doors, she did not even think about running away. She always had access to a phone. She was very afraid to even imagine what the company would do to her as a punishment for running away. One day, Cameron told Colin that he was planning something truly grand. He wants to create a dungeon for slaves, where many girls will be kept. Now Colin was helping him dig a pit in a place hidden from the neighbors. In 1980, Cameron allowed Colin to call home. He said the company was listening to this call. The girl should not complain, report her location, and, of course, ask for help. She was talking to her younger sister Bonnie. Bonnie was so shocked, she began to ask her sister questions. Colin assured her sister that she was fine, asked her not to search for her or reach out anywhere. After that call, the Collin family did not contact the police. They decided that the girl had become part of a religious cult. And this is her decision. The parents were not close with their daughter. In her hitchhiking travels, she often ran away from them. Despite her very young age, she had already disappeared for quite long periods. However, not to that extent. The family believed in their relationship. At that moment, the parents thought that their daughter with Michael. Cameron came up with this alias when joining the cult. Cameron intimidated his victim so much and understood that he didn't hesitate to leave Collin in her family for a day, saying he had an important meeting and would pick her up tomorrow. The sisters said that they and their parents were afraid to pressure Collin, question her, or persuade her about anything, so as not to push her further away. She had just begun to make contact with them, which they really didn't want to risk losing her. Michael promised his parents before leaving that they would soon have a home with Collin, and he would give them the address. As a final gesture, the parents even took a photo in which the fake couple looked equally fake happy. When their girl left, once again they did nothing. After this visit, Collin's life. It got even worse, if that can be imagined at all. Cameron began to worry that he had given her too much freedom, so he immediately locked her in a box. She was once again forbidden to move around the house. Collin spent whole days in this makeshift coffin. It was especially difficult in the summer when it was very stuffy and hot, despite the ventilation. Cameron would try her when the children went to sleep. A couple more years passed. For 2 whole years, she didn't even see the sunlight in her wooden box. In 1983, Cameron once again allowed Collin to freely roam around the house and even the yard. Neighbors and children were convinced that the nanny had returned. Cameron softened his attitude towards the victim. After some time, he told Janice that Collin would live in the house on the rights of the second wife. Shortly thereafter, Collin was even able to get a job at the motel as a maid with Cameron's permission. Now the girl worked, constantly saw neighbors. She interacted with a large number of people, but continued to believe that she was being watched, and no one knew about her terrible story. In that same year, Janice became interested in Christianity. She read the Bible, she began to pray. She knew that Collin was very religious. And when Cameron was at work, they read the Bible together in their free time. This brought them closer. Cameron, learning about this, started allowing Collin and Jenny to go to church on Sundays. Collin saw how Jenny's heart opened up to her. A year later, Jenny decided to help Collin escape. Someone believes it was jealousy. Janice loved her husband with a sick kind of love and did not want him to have a second wife. However, judging from the following events, it was Vera who made her act this way. In any case, on August 9, 1984, Janice told Collin that there was no company, that no one would come for her. Janice asked Collin not to tell anyone what happened to her. The woman hoped that if Collin left their home, then Cameron would become a normal person. Unlike J.C. Lee Dugard, who denied experiencing Stockholm Syndrome in every possible way, Collin Stan is a vivid example of this psychological condition. Yes, she was scared. But when she found out that the company was gone, she gave Cameron a chance to change. She even called him from the bus stop, said she was leaving. He cried. She often called him in the beginning. It sounds unbelievable, but this is exactly how Stockholm Syndrome manifests. The victim becomes attached to their tormentor, shows interest in their future, asks either to lighten the sentence or not to punish at all, visits them in places of imprisonment, and so on. In any case, Collin did not tell anyone anything. She returned home after 7 long years spent in endless suffering. She just returned without answering any questions, and no one would have ever known about it until the next event happened. Janice hoped that finally she and her husband would live a normal life. But it seems that her plan was never meant to come true. Cameron dreamed of darkening with captives and a new one with torture. Janice never told what made her act like that, but it seems that after so many years, conscience awoke in her. On November 8, 1984, Jenny asked her pastor if she could confess. Frank Debney, the church pastor, noticed that Jenny was very nervous. What he then heard was unimaginable to him. He said that this needed to be reported to the police. And they did it together. 4 days after these events, the police contacted Colin. Colin behaved so calmly that the police initially did not even believe the story, considering Jenny crazy, trying to deceive her husband, probably because of infidelity or something else. Cameron Hooker was eventually taken into custody. Later, the terrible story was confirmed. An incredible amount of evidence was found. These were various torture devices, photos of Colin during torture, hundreds of BDSM magazines. Janice also spoke about the kidnapping, torture, and murder of Maria Elizabeth Spanhake. The authorities still could not find her remains. Accused Cameron was only on trial for Colin Stan's case. Janice Hooker testified against her husband in exchange for full immunity. Cameron did not admit his guilt. The torturer's lawyer claimed that everything was done with mutual consent. They were a couple. They used to visit Colin's parents. Everyone saw the girl alone on the street multiple times. She voluntarily returned home after work. The prosecutor showed the contract signed by Colin, which proved that the girl did not belong to herself. After Colin's own testimony in the courtroom, people were crying. Some jurors could not sleep after hearing the monstrous details that had to be told to the girl. But lawyer Cameron had another trump card up his sleeve. These are love letters from Colin to Cameron. Before that, Colin had never told anyone about them. She wrote that she was falling more and more in love. It was really her writing. It was not written under threat. Cameron said he kidnapped the girl. But later she fell in love with him. And it was all by mutual agreement. But still taken into account what the girl had to go through. The feeling of attachment and even love she cultivated in herself in order not to experience the agony of rape every day. This is a mechanism of psychological defense, a perfectly acceptable human reaction to a highly traumatic event. Cameron Hooker was sentenced to 104 years of imprisonment. In 2015, 61-year-old Cameron Hooker applied for parole under the California parole program. He was denied and will not have another parole hearing for 15 years. There are several similar stories that took place during this period when hitchhiking turned into a nightmare come true. Robert Ben Rhodes was born in 1945 in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Only 3 murders have been proven to be committed by him. Robert Ben Rhodes traveled in a truck. His van was equipped as a torture chamber. He is suspected of brutally killing over 50 women between 1975 and 1990. The years of his bloody activities coincide with the routes of his mobile slaughter, the places where women disappeared. Sometimes he photographed his victims before tormenting them. He is credited with the famous photograph of Regina K. Walters before her death in an old shed in Illinois. Burbank, California. On May 7, 1972, he agreed to drive 2 students, Mary Ann Pays and Anita Lucies, from Berkeley to Stanford. At first everything was going as usual, but after an hour of driving, Edmund got out of the car, grabbed Mary, raped her on the ground next to the car. Anita was in the back seat of the closed car the whole time. First, Edmund killed Mary. And then he dealt with Anita. He stuffed the bodies into the car and brought them home. Edmund Emil Kemper was a necrophiliac. In September of the same year, he killed 15-year-old Ika Koa, whom he then dismembered. Later, Edmund killed 18-year-old Cindy Shull, whom he decapitated. He buried the head in his backyard. It turned out he often came to this place to talk to her. His victims also included Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Lewis. Sometimes everything goes as usual on the road, but then the driver returns to his future victims. In 1982, Gray Tar Sigur Arnason picked up 2 sisters, Yvette and Marie Bohet, and drove them home. When night fell, Gray Tar returned to the sisters. He killed Marie. Yvette tried for several hours and then also killed. After the trial, Colin Stan completely rid herself of the dependency she still felt for Cameron Hooker. She stopped communicating with him, as well as with his wife. She almost immediately went to study as an accountant, got a job after her studies, got married, and gave birth to a daughter. Colin Stan is married for the 4th time and is raising her grandson, who is about 7 years old. Now she helps women rehabilitate after such terrible incidents that happened to them.